I want you to take a second and just picture the life you didn't choose.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you know the exact one I'm talking about. It's that job offer in a different city you ended up turning down after like weeks of agonizing over it. Or
Right.
maybe it's the relationship you walked away from, or even just the completely different version of yourself that would exist right now if you had just said that one thing you swallowed at the very last second.
It becomes a very crowded room in our heads, when we start letting all those alternate versions of ourselves in.
Oh, absolutely.
We spend a lot of time mapping out the geography of the unlived life.
We really do. And usually when we think about those unlived lives, we treat them like science fiction. We picture them like parallel universes floating out there in the cosmos, completely detached from our current reality.
Yeah, exactly. Like they have nothing to do with us now.
Right. But today's deep dive is going to look at this through a very different lens. Today's source material proposes this really fascinating concept. It frames these alternate paths not as sci-fi tropes, but as theoretical architecture.
Theoretical architecture. I love that.
Yeah, they are blueprints. The text actually refers to them as proposals and suggestions the unlived keeps making to the lived.
Right. So they are shapes drawn in the air,
Yeah.
essentially. They're just testing the structural integrity of your current life to see if any actual weight will ever be set upon them.
Mm-hmm.
They exist purely as potential energy.
Because none of them are real. I mean, not in the way the floor beneath you right now is real.
No, not yet, anyway.
Not yet, exactly. So, our mission for this deep dive is to decode the hidden language of our choices. We're going to explore how these different potential realities actively fight for your attention, how your physical body reacts to them, like on a biological level, and ultimately how to stop letting your life happen by accident.
And that's the thing. The way a timeline crosses over from theoretical architecture to concrete reality
Mm-hmm.
is rarely through some grand cinematic decision.
Right.
It's a much quieter process. And understanding the mechanics of how we filter these choices, well, it changes everything about how we view our daily habits.
Yeah, so to understand how we actually choose a path, the source text indicates we first have to understand how these theoretical paths, present themselves to our minds, and some of them are incredibly loud.
Oh, they are deafening.
The text categorizes these as the campaigning timelines.
Yes. And the mechanism driving these campaigning timelines is essentially structural anxiety.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Structural anxiety.
Yeah, so these timelines are fully aware that they are only theory. They know they lack the density of reality, and that instability makes them absolutely frantic to be chosen.
That is so interesting. And the source text outlines these incredibly specific tactics these anxious timelines use to get your attention. It claims they send signs. They arrange coincidences. Like they somehow ensure that a specific, highly relevant song comes on the radio at the exact moment you're doubting your current path.
Yeah, or they make sure a certain person's name surfaces twice in one afternoon.
Exactly. But I want to ground this for a second because we aren't talking about magic here, right? What is the actual mechanism making these signs feel so real to us?
Well, with the text describes poetically actually maps perfectly onto cognitive science. Specifically, it's a network in our brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
Okay, the RAS.
Right. So your brain is constantly bombarded by millions of bits of sensory data every single second.
Mm-hmm.
And to keep you from just completely going insane, the RAS filters out almost everything, only letting through information it deems currently relevant to your survival or whatever you're focusing on.
Oh, wow. So when a timeline is campaigning, when you're highly anxious about a potential alternate choice, you have basically programmed your RAS to scan for evidence of that choice.
Right.
So if I'm like agonizing over moving to Chicago for a new job, the timeline isn't literally manipulating the radio to play a song about Chicago.
Right, no magic involved.
My brain is just suddenly allowing that song through the filter because it matches my internal anxiety.
That's the core of it, yeah.
Yeah.
We experience confirmation bias fueled by apophenia.
Apophenia.
Yeah, it's the human tendency to perceive meaningful connections between completely unrelated things. So a door left slightly open is just a drafty hallway, right?
Right.
But to a brain primed by an anxious, unmade choice, it registers as a profound invitation.
Wow.
The text uses a very evocative word here. It says, these timelines ache. But they don't ache out of romance. They ache because generating this psychological pressure is literally the only tool available to a state of potential. It lacks the foundation of reality.
Okay, let's unpack this with a real-world example, because reading that part of the text, I immediately thought of like an aggressive algorithm on social media.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right, because think about how those systems work. You hover over an ad for a pair of hiking boots for 2 seconds. You don't even click on it.
You don't even scroll.
Exactly, you do nothing. But the algorithm detects that microhesitation. And suddenly, those boots are on your sidebar, in your email, injected into your feed on different
It
platforms.
creates this frantic illusion that those boots are everywhere and inevitable.
Yes. Desperate for your engagement because without your clicks, the ad campaign essentially dies.
And the text explicitly states that this campaigning timeline needs your belief the way a story needs a reader.
Wow.
Yeah, stop reading and it stops existing. Stop feeding the algorithm your micro-hesitations, and it loses its purpose. The timeline cannot stand on its own architecture. It requires you to constantly validate it with your attention.
So how does that translate to our physical experience? Like when this hyper-targeted campaigning timeline is throwing all these filtered signs at us, what does that actually feel like in the body?
Well, the body usually processes the data before the conscious mind even applies a narrative to it.
Okay.
Your nervous system registers this ache timeline as a distinct flutter.
A flutter.
Yeah. Biologically, you are experiencing sympathetic nervous system arousal. It's a low simmer of cortisol and adrenaline in your bloodstream.
Oh, man.
It's that compulsive need to check your phone one more time, or the urge to replay a coincidence in your head over and over to extract meaning from it. We experience this physiological stress response, and we mislabel it as destiny.
I really want you, the listener, to reflect on a time you felt that frantic flutter about a major decision. A time your chest felt tight, your brain was connecting random dots, and you thought, oh, this must be fate because I feel so incredibly spun up about it.
Right.
We are so frequently conditioned to mistake pure autonomic panic for a sign from the universe.
And people spend entire decades mistaking that flutter for the truth simply because adrenaline demands to be noticed. It is loud by design.
Which brings us to the complete opposite side of the spectrum. If the campaigning timeline is driven by this frantic need to exist, what happens when a potential reality simply does not care if you choose it or not?
This brings us to the timelines that do not perform.
Right. There are no carefully timed songs. There are no sudden coincidences designed to make you feel special.
None. They do not generate those cognitive filters because they are already whole in their theoretical state.
Right.
They are entirely indifferent to whether you grant them your attention or not.
The source material offers a really compelling metaphor for this state. It says, these steady timelines stay available, quote, the way a room stays furnished, whether or not anyone walks through the door.
The furnished room.
Yes, the furnished room. If you choose them, they receive you without gratitude. If
Yeah.
you don't choose them, they don't diminish. They maintain their shape regardless. But I kind of want to push back on this framing a little bit.
Oh, go ahead.
Because the text paints this quiet, non-campaigning timeline as something noble and pure. But if I apply that to the real world, say, a job offer where the employer refuses to negotiate and just says, take it or leave it.
Okay.
Or a relationship where the other person doesn't seem to care if I stay or go. I don't see stability in that. I see a massive red flag.
Right. It looks like apathy.
Exactly. Apathy. If a choice doesn't seem to want me, isn't that just a dead end? Why would anyone willingly walk into a reality that doesn't welcome them?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's entirely natural to conflate a lack of desperation with a lack of warmth.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains are wired for reciprocity. Right. But the text is drawing a vital distinction here. This timeline isn't cold because it lacks warmth. It seems cold to us only because its warmth was never conditional on your attention to begin with.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Think of it less like an apathetic partner and more like a massive old-growth tree.
Okay.
The tree doesn't bend down to try and convince you to sit beneath it. It just provides the shade. Its structural integrity is complete regardless of your presence.
So the warmth of the campaigning timeline is effectively a bribe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The campaigning timeline is essentially a salesman desperate to close a deal because the foundation of the house is cracking. It offers conditional warmth and highly curated signs to convince you to move in.
Right.
The steady timeline doesn't need to bribe you because it is already structurally sound. Gratitude implies that it needed rescuing from non-existence, and the furnished room, it doesn't need rescuing.
Okay, that makes sense. And just as the sympathetic nervous system processes the campaigning timeline as a frantic flutter, our biology processes this steady timeline in a completely different way.
Completely different. It processes it as an exhale.
Exhale.
Yeah. This is a parasympathetic nervous system response. The fight or flight chemicals recede, and it arises as a settling low in the belly. It's a physiological sensation of baseline stability. You aren't experiencing the cognitive load of constantly analyzing coincidences to hold its shape.
So what does this all mean? We have these two very different forces, the flutter and the exhale, arriving in our bodies. What does our preference between these two actually reveal about our inner psychology?
Well, it requires a bit of introspection. The text argues that if you are consistently drawn to the timeline that aches, it may be because you equate being wanted with being real.
Wow. Equating being wanted with being real, that mechanism explains so much about human behavior.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. You feel the campaign, all that intense biological feedback, and you mistake the intensity for evidence of quality. You think, surely, something trying this hard to get my attention must be the correct path.
We project meaning onto effort. But the author provides a crucial warning here. Insistence is not the same as inevitability.
That's a great line. Insistence is not inevitability.
Right. A timeline that has to work that hard to convince you is broadcasting its own instability. What you are actually choosing in that moment isn't the reality itself. You are choosing the dopamine rush of feeling chased.
Because being chased feels indistinguishable from being loved in the short term.
Exactly. And the text is gentle about this human vulnerability. It acknowledges that being chased fulfills a very deep psychological need for validation.
Of course it does.
But you must recognize the difference before you build an entire life on top of it. Because eventually the chase ends.
The dopamine fades.
The adrenaline burns out.
Yeah.
And you are left standing on a theoretical architecture that might not actually be able to hold your weight in the real world.
So what does it say about your psychology if you find yourself able to choose the timeline that doesn't ache? The furnished room that offers no signs and no proof?
Walking toward that timeline demonstrates a rare kind of surety. It means you have bypassed the need for constant external confirmation. You can walk toward a decision without requiring the universe to beg you first.
Which goes directly against most societal conditioning. I mean, from a very young age, media and culture teach us to trust noise over quiet.
Oh, 100%.
We are taught to trust urgency and struggle over ease. If something isn't difficult, if it isn't accompanied by a dramatic cinematic struggle, we assume it has less value. We assume the path that isn't working to earn our belief must be the wrong one.
We view ease with suspicion, when in reality, that steady timeline might simply possess the foundational stability that the loud timeline is still trying to construct. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text takes this psychological concept and zooms all the way out to the macro level, suggesting that this isn't just about human decision-making, but about the very nature of existence.
The universal negotiation.
The architecture underneath reality itself, yeah. The text suggests that the universe isn't a single fixed map that we are passively walking across, just discovering things that were already there. It frames existence as an active, ongoing negotiation between states of potential.
Okay, let's unpack that negotiation. How does that practically apply to reality?
Think about it through the conceptual lens of quantum mechanics, specifically superposition.
Okay.
That's where particles exist in multiple theoretical states simultaneously until they are observed.
Right, like Schrodinger's cat.
Exactly. This architectural theory of timelines operates on a very similar principle. You are surrounded by a field of possibilities. Some of those possibilities are highly unstable. They ache to collapse into reality. Others are stable in their theoretical form. The universe is a negotiation between the possibilities that are anxious to be real and those that consider themselves complete.
And we are the ones forcing the collapse. Our attention is the deciding vote in that referendum.
Yes.
Every moment we live dictates which kind of existence gets to harden into fact. But that implies we're always standing at the ballot box, consciously casting a vote for the loud path or the quiet path.
Right.
Most of the time, I don't feel like I'm making a profound choice at all. I'm just living my daily routine. So what happens when we think we aren't making a choice?
Well, this introduces the most insidious part of this architectural theory. It is the trapdoor of the unexamined life. The text makes a profound point that sitting out the vote is still an active architectural decision. The inevitable eventual realities take shape through default.
The timeline you never actively refuse, the one you simply let continue by doing nothing, becomes the one that hardens into your life.
Yes, we suffer from status quo bias, assuming that doing nothing keeps us in a neutral state. But theory doesn't stay theory forever. Doing nothing applies continuous pressure to whatever default timeline you are currently occupying.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text uses the phrase, the accumulation of small, unexamined yeses.
Small, unexamined yeses.
Yeah, and when you look at human behavior, that is exactly how we build our lives. It's rarely one giant dramatic crossroads where you have to cut the red wire or the blue wire to save the day.
Right. It's never
It,
like the movies.
it's letting a default path continue through habituation. It's staying in a mediocre job for another year simply because the cognitive load of updating your resume and interviewing feels too high.
Yeah.
Or it's letting a relationship drift into marriage because you didn't want to initiate a hard conversation. It's the sheer momentum of not stopping something.
You are allowing the architecture to solidify through neglect. Through the accumulation of those small, unexamined yeses, a timeline stops asking to be believed and simply becomes the historical fact of your life.
Wow. So the loud, aching timeline either finally gets answered or it exhausts its energy and collapses. And the quiet stillness of the furnished room either gets trusted or it gets abandoned for something that demands more attention.
Which leads to the most sobering takeaway from the source material. What remains at the end of this process, your actual lived life, isn't necessarily the most true timeline.
Right.
It isn't the optimal path or the most destined one. It is simply the one that survived the filter of your habits.
It is the one that got chosen, whether it was chosen by your active, focused attention or by your behavioral default, by your internal surety, or just by your sheer exhaustion with the decision-making process, by your presence or by the absence of you.
Exactly. Doing nothing cements theory into hard reality just as permanently as a definitive conscious action.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to pose the source text's final questions directly to you listening right now. Take a look at the reality you are occupying today. Which timeline is actually holding your weight right now? And is it holding you because you keep insisting it's real, constantly feed of it your attention, your anxiety, and your effort? Or is it holding you because it never needed your insistence at all?
And the text advises not to rush to answer that. Let the question sit. The answers to those kinds of foundational questions are usually much more honest when they are left open for a while to settle into your parasympathetic system.
Just let the dust settle on it.
Yeah, but I do want to leave you with one final thread to untangle on your own, something that builds on the mechanics we've discussed today. We spent this deep dive analyzing the timeline that eventually hardens into your permanent reality. But consider all those timelines you didn't choose. Yeah. The ones that campaigned endlessly, that hijacked your reticular activating system to throw coincidences at you but were ultimately ignored. What happens to that displaced energy? Do those aching, frantic timelines eventually burn out and disappear entirely? Or do they become a phantom weight you carry in your current reality?
That's a haunting thought.
Do they hover in the background of your nervous system, subtly influencing every future unexamined yes you make?
The floor beneath us might be solid reality, but the blueprints of the unlived life never really stop offering alternative suggestions. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a close look at the architecture of your own life this week and ask yourself who or what habit is really building it.